Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So I got this in the mail today, which means I'm early slash on time this week. So yay. Um, and I like that Rogue is featured on this cover, but I'm not a fan of the horror kind of aspect. And you can see like graves down here. Jubilee and Remy and Logan and Kurt. Um, okay, I had a couple of questions about this issue and I had a couple of observations. So, okay, we have in the beginning, basically a flashback between Sarah and Charles, and they've been together, like, it's been a month since they met, and tells Charles, I'm pregnant, and he's like, but it's too soon to know that. Like, how can you know that? And she said, I just know. And he says, but what do you want? And she wants this, like this idyllic kind of family life. And and she's like, think of it, Charles, we can have that. And he hesitates, which to her, that tells her everything she needs to know. But really, he says he does want that. It's just that I feel like he's thinking because he's a mutant, he knows he has a greater responsibility, and that also, yeah, gets in the way of him having this idyllic little family life because he knows he has greater responsibilities, or he feels like he does. Like he feels this calling, to help his fellow mutants. So present day in Louisiana, Kurt and Rogue are looking for Wolverine because Rogue can feel him dying. She can feel where he is. So they go to look for him. And what I like or find interesting is that, like in the last issue, when Wolverine was fighting Sarah, she said, go ahead, do your catchphrase. And she's like, well, it's no Avengers Assemble. So I think it's fun that they're like inserting just little nods to other Marvel characters, just kind of to say, hey, the X-Men exist in this whole universe, and they know about each other. So it's not like just a self-isolated little thing, little book. It's in the greater Marvel universe. So I think that's cool. Especially, well, okay, when we get there, I'll show you. And Rogue also says, since I'm talking about that, that's why I brought that up. Sorry, that hopefully whoever is up there besides Galactus, please let it not be too late for them to find Wolverine. They find him, and I mean, he's in really bad shape, like really bad. And so Rogue tells Kurt to take him back to Haven, where they're staying with Marcus, and Jubilee will know what to do. And Rogue's just scared. She's like, I can't lose him. I mean, when she hated herself, he taught her how to stop. And he's the first decent man that ever told her that he loved her and meant it. And Wolverine's like, leave me. And Rogue's like, you made me the leader, so this is my call. She also calls Gambit, which, look, the kitties. Oh, made me happy when I saw that. Because, of course, me and cats. Of course, I have Dazzler, so, cats and X-Men. So she calls Gambit and tells him to stay away. She doesn't want him involved in this. So she says she can feel Sarah, like she can feel, spiders crawling on her skin. She feels her. And Sarah says something interesting. She says, you mutants, pretty as models, living in castles. And of course, Krakoa, it was kind of like living in a castle. It was, idyllic, paradise, that sort of thing. And Rogue says, we don't live in castles anymore. But the funny thing that she mentioned pretty as models, because of course not all mutants are pretty, because the Morlocks. But for the most part, all superheroes, I will say, are pretty, we're handsome, or whatever. For the most part, like I can't think of really like an unattractive superhero or um, you know, just off the top of my head, I can't. Super villains, sure. But I feel like that just is kind of a nod to that we want to read more about like fantasy, like idealized versions of kind of ourselves. So I guess I feel like okay, I feel like this started in the 90s when in the 90s and I talk about this when I'm uh delve into my wizard magazines. Sex it sells. Especially in the 90s, you see most comic books were geared towards men, the male demographic. Women were like, you know, like drawn super, super attractive, like, you know, overly sexualized in a lot of cases. Um, I feel like that will never completely go away, but I feel like it also isn't as bad as it used to be. Because, like, for example, David's art, it's really pretty, and Rogue is really pretty. And she is also, like, you know, the female form, she's in really good shape. I mean, she looks great, but she's not, like, overly, like I said, like, overly sexualized, which, like, I appreciate that. It becomes more about the story and more about the characters. But, like, I mean, but she's still super attractive. So I just thought that was interesting that they threw that in there. I don't know if that was like on purpose, like kind of a nod to, hey, this is how it's always been, sort of thing, because it's true, superheroes, no one wants to really read about, well, of course, like in the 90s, you had, I would say, I guess Deadpool is the only like super unattractive superhero, but really he's like a vigilante that I can think of. But he mostly just wears the mask. So if someone picked up, obviously because in the movies everyone knows, but if someone just picked up an issue and started flipping through it, they would never know what he looks like because he always has the mask on. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. I'm so terrible about that. I'm so sorry. So Sarah says, let's see if we can't do anything about um the pretty part, like mess her up. And she also, Sarah says, I can smell the emptiness in you, that, childless, um, to Rogue. Okay, so I mentioned the references to the greater Marvel universe because this is coming in December. Which, of course, this is not the first time that they've done this, or even the second time, maybe even the third time. But of course, it's the there have been decades and decades of superhero lore at this point, and it's hard to be completely original. Which, not to say I'm not gonna, like, it's not like I'm gonna not read it, because I am. I'm excited about it still, but it's not like it hasn't been done before. But yeah, I'm still excited about it, because, X-Men, of course. Um, so Kurt takes Wolverine back to Jubilee. You see the director, the warden, and Philip, they're talking, and he says Sarah, has found the kids. She means to kill them. And the warden's like, that's not our problem. And Philip says, they're what, 15, 16, maybe oldest is 17? Same as your brother. Which, she says, basically, watch it to Philip. You're stepping into a subject that I don't really want to talk about and don't feel like you should talk about. I feel, like I said, I feel like Philip is kind of like her pet mutant. He like can sense things we saw in the first issue. And I mean, there's been a huge history of humans, even though they detest and hate mutants, using mutants for their own purposes. Um, I mean, Days of the Future Past. I mean, look at that. So Philip says we should send them help. We should send the trustees. And the warden's like, no, we're not doing that. So Sarah and Rogue are fighting still. And Sarah brings up the fact that, you should thank me for getting you away from Charles, getting him, getting out from underneath his thumb, because he seems to always get what he wants, doesn't he? And speaking of Charles, the warden earlier in this issue says that he's catatonic at this point. So basically, like, we can tell Sarah obviously has this huge grudge against Professor Xavier. And Sarah also mentions in this fight that her powers comes from living things. So like all the bugs, crickets, all the trees. There's like 10 million acres of trees in, Louisiana alone. So Rogue kicks her and hears this crack. So she's like, okay, she can be beaten. She's not invincible. And Rogue, goes through her powers. Like, I have Wonder Man's powers running through me and some of Captain Marvel's somewhere in there. Punches her and says, and Logan says, go to hell. But, even though it seems like, okay, the tide's turning, comes back, and Rogue's like, oh my gosh, she has it hit so hard, she gets a concussion. She's like, I just need a minute. And she's like, I could take your powers. And Sarah's like, do you really want to do that? Look at me. So we go into her origin story. And here she is with her son, Brian, which, okay, this is where, like, I have so many questions. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. Brian, he's 9 years old. I'm assuming, since she brought up in the beginning of this issue, that that's Charles' son. But I feel like, obviously, since they're just kind of alone in this picture, that they're not like a family unit. But I feel like maybe there's some bad blood between Sarah and Professor Xavier, or he said, I can't raise him with you, but I will be there to support you, like, financially, whatever you need. So, yeah, we don't know. I don't know, but I'm assuming that Brian has to be Xavier's because, the whole pregnant thing at the beginning of this issue. So basically, what happened is a hurricane came, 125 billion in damage. A lot of people left and just never came back. They waited for help that never came. So she was holding on to the roof because it was flooding, raining, just constant, never ending. She was holding onto the roof with her left hand, and she held Brian on with her right. And at some point during the night, she looked and her hand was empty. And then she just let go because she's like, this, Brian's not even there, so I might as well just let go. Which just is really bad timing because, of course, a hurricane, Milton and Helene just happened, and like hundreds of people died and millions in damage. And like I saw the news on it, and just, my heart breaks for those people. And it just very poor timing. But of course, not like Gail did that on purpose. Obviously, just unfortunately very poor timing for a hurricane to be tied into her, her origin story, I guess. I mean, yeah, like all the damage, goodness gracious. So she said she just, sank. She waited for peace. She waited for forgiveness. There were like bodies, like dead bodies all around her, just all kinds of just gross whatever stuff around her. And then like 3 days later, she rose and she was this. And she said, I haven't slept in 17 years. And basically, Rogue is like, well, how did you survive that? Maybe maybe you're a mutant. And Sarah, comes at her, screams at her, don't you ever call me a mutant, you diseased little sanctimonious tart, which I love that I love that Gail, has insults that aren't like typical insults. Um, like when she, in the first issue, she used wench as an insult, and that's not something you hear very often anymore. And then, using tart, like I love that she just throws these like more random like insults into her books. They're mostly have been used in the past but aren't used currently, but I feel like I'm going to start using them. Not that I insult people, but I mean, if I ever did, I think I would use those instead of the regular insults because they're just more fun. So anyway, she snaps, breaks Rogue's hand. The warden actually calls Gambit, which I don't know how she knows his information, but I guess because she runs a mutant prison, she knows like all the mutants where they are and what's going on with them. But I feel like if she knows where they are, then why wouldn't she just go get them? If she wants to lock up all the mutants. See, that's what I don't understand. Like this little part, I don't understand how she knows and why Gambit would even like take this call, basically. So basically she's warning Gambit, hey, Sarah's coming with her minions to kill you, to kill the kids. Yeah. And she's like, that's all. Good luck. And so basically he tells Marcus to have everyone go in the basement. Don't open the door. Don't just stay down there. And he's like, what are you doing out here, Jubilee? She's like, I'm an X-Men. I'm going to fight. And he's like, well, Wolverine needs you. And she's like, no, he'll be fine. And we see Fawn, who was in the first issue, and you can see she's been radically changed. I'm assuming by Sarah. I mean, now she looks very scary, and we don't know who all these people are. This person has a sword. But we know Fawn, so I feel like Sarah's somehow taking mutants and turning them into like her slaves, her own personal army somehow. So the kids say, well, if we're gonna die, we want to die fighting, basically. And they make the symbol for mutants, and Gambit says, well, I don't have a catchphrase. He's said, fight forward, no shame in running if you need to. And Wolverine comes out and says, that must have been the all-time worst battle speech in history. And Gambit says, have you listened to Chuck or Summers? It's like listening to corn grow. And Wolverine says, just point me towards the bad guys before I fall over. And then this is the next issue. And yay, the kitties. Aw, how cute. So, yeah. Like I said, questions. I have questions, of course. I feel like Gail will answer them. I don't feel like she's going to leave us completely hanging in terms of, the whole Charles, Brian, Sarah relationship history. And of course, like, how does Sarah change mutants into like her army? And I feel like our questions will be answered, but of course not yet. We'll have to wait till the next issue or maybe the issue after that to get everything squared away and answered. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It's fun. I like I said, not a huge horror fan, so I'm not a fan of this villain because definitely creepy. But I'm enjoying it. I want to read the next issue. So that's always a good sign when you're like, okay, what happens next? That always tells you that, okay, it's a good story and you want to continue reading. So anyway, speaking of continuing, I hope you guys follow me, So you're here for the next video. I have a couple things in the works for Halloween. I need to get those done. So hopefully you'll join me for that, and hopefully you just join me for future videos. I mean, like, subscribe, share. I appreciate anything, like any support you give me. Honestly, I really do. I mean, I do this mostly like for me because it's fun. I enjoy it, and I feel like I have lots of friends who I can discuss X-Men with. Like, I love responding to your comments and everything, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I'd still probably do it if nobody like nobody was following me, but I don't have anyone like personally in my life that I can just be like, oh my gosh, did you read about what happened in this issue? So I feel like I can do that with you guys. So thanks for being there, and I hope you will join me in the future. Until next time, bye.